and welcome to today's FYN Virtual Learning Series session. Alors, bonjour et bienvenue aux séries d'apprentissage du réseau des jeunes fonctionnaires fédéraux. It's my pleasure to be hosting today's session on how to be more productive, strategies for managing your workload in non-traditional settings. Alors, aujourd'hui, on va discuter de comment être plus productif, les stratégies pour gérer votre charge de travail dans un contexte non traditionnel. With us today, we have Erica Stevens-Rennie and Todd Scanlon, who will be sharing their thoughts and experience with us today on this important topic. I would like to mention that I am joining you from Ottawa, the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people. I would also like to recognize that many of you are participating from other traditional territories all over the country. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Erica to start us off and to Todd. Alors, je vais donner la parole à Erica et puis à Todd. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, my name is Erica Stevens-Rennie, and I'm one of the co-founders of FlexGC. I'm so glad to be with you here today with Todd. I'll say off the top, well, first of all, I'm joining from the unceded territories of the Sinix, the Lakes people, the Syilx, the Okanagan, and the Connexa, and the Shuswap peoples. So I'm in the interior of British Columbia. And I'm your stand-in presenter today for someone who I usually go to for productivity advice, and that's Jody LeBlanc, who unfortunately is unable to be with us today unexpectedly. But you still have Todd, and I have Jody's deck, and I think I'm a productivity fan as well. So we're super pleased to be with you today. I'll tell you a little bit just about FlexGC. We are a peer-to-peer platform for offering advice to folks across the government during this really challenging time of transitioning to remote work. It's a transition that many of us did not choose. Some of us still do not want, and yet here we are. So we are here to talk about productivity, but we also want to say, please be gentle on yourself, recognizing that you are still living through a pandemic, and that comes with all the mental strain. And some people have said there's like 30% of our brain capacity that is now dedicated to sort of managing life in pandemic. So keep, as you're trying to like jump back into it in September and October, right? We did a session earlier with FYN in early September called Normal-ish. And so if that's something you're experiencing and you want some tips and tricks around, practicing self-empathy and empathy for others, then I'd encourage you to go back and check that out as well. So just one more little thing about me. I'm a free agent based in British Columbia. I was working on the FlexGC initiative at the Canada School up until the beginning or end of September, I guess. And I've just now joined the team at Health Canada working on the team, but still involved in FlexGC as a volunteer. And also, Todd, say a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, so I'm Todd. I'm an Agile coach currently at ISAD or Industry Canada, and I'm calling from my basement.
Thanks, Todd. Marcella, you have the deck. Do you want to put that up for us on screen?
Getting it ready.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, and I'll say a little bit about Jody as well. So Jody LeBlanc, you can find her on Twitter as well. I think Marcella's going to post the hashtags and handles of all of us. But Jody's worked from home now for 5 years, similar to me. And so she's had to find strategies that would help her to work smarter and not harder. And she's an extrovert, so her particular challenge is like staying focused, not with all these colleagues around her. So we'll talk about some of her strategies, some of Todd's and some of my own in the deck. So you can go to the next slide now, Marcella. The first slide is about scheduling a life repair day. So this is about if you feel like things have really gone off the rails, this is a strategy for getting things under control. So a life repair day is about going slower to move faster. So this means making the space to deal with all the things that are piling up and hanging over your heads. It starts with attaining inbox zero, but then goes a lot further. So Jody finds it takes her about 2 to 6 hours to complete everything on this list. So every email is answered, every piece of paper, envelope, post-it note is filed, thrown away, or added to an actual to-do list. your system of physical electronic files is up to date, every text in your smartphone is answered, and your inbox, sort of literal and virtual, is empty with everything backed up. So I know that can sound overwhelming, but Jody says she does this twice a year. I'll say this is aspirational for me. I don't quite do it to this extent, and I don't maybe do it as frequently as Jody does, but I can attest that it is a very freeing feeling to kind of just get fully caught up on all the little things, and it makes such a difference to have a clean slate. You can really sort of clear away the overwhelm. The other thing, as Todd and I were talking about this yesterday, I realized that this can be a really useful strategy for those of you that work in places where ATIPs are common. So going through and deleting your transitory email, making time in your day to do that, is something that can reduce the volume of things you need to sort through in case there's an ATIP request you have to respond to. So this is that, go slow to move faster. You do a little bit of extra work up front, and you make it easier to sort of speed through your tasks as they come to you in the future. Todd, anything to say about this for you?
Yeah. So, in the new world of working, our most powerful and useful tool is our brain. So anything that we can do to make that better, to make that tool more capable and pliable, that's what you really want to focus on. And so it's really interesting how, especially how our brains, we really focus on work that's not done. We never really think about things that we finish. We think about, oh, I have to, reply to this email. I have to, do this task. But if you clean those up, your brain actually thinks of more productive things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you can go to the next slide now, Marcella. Something that Jody said to me sort of very early on when I was like more than a year ago was every day you get 24 gold coins, and how you spend them is up to you. So if you feel like you're not sure where your time is going, one of the strategies can be tracking your time. And you can do this for just a week or two, or you can do it on an ongoing basis. But the idea here is kind of to collect data on how you spend your time, and then figure out, are there little tweaks that you can do to your schedule to make it work better for you? So if you find you're spending hours on autopilot activities, or sometimes people find social media can be a big suck. So the tracking your time can help you be more mindful of how you're using your time. And I would add, this can feel overwhelming, like the idea of tracking your time. You see something like this, sometimes it can feel like, oh, that feels like I could never do that. It would take so much time. But it can actually take a lot less time and attention than you think. So just every hour or two, take a minute just to jot down how you spent your time. This is not supposed to be the bulleted list of everything you've accomplished. This is just very broadly, I spent half an hour doing research. I spent another half an hour on email. So just very briefly. And then the idea is at the end of those 2 weeks or week, you look back and you see, where is my time going? Am I spending that in a way that I'm satisfied with? And another strategy here can be actually to design your ideal day or your ideal week. So if you look at this and you think, oh my goodness, I am not getting as much time as I want for physical activity, then you can kind of design your own schedule and do a compare and contrast exercise around, how am I missing the boat and I'm not attaining this, and where are the places I can shift that? Todd, anything to add?
So this is so powerful because the way our brain works is that we love nostalgia, right? So when we think of like a past week, even though it may have we have been very unproductive, we're like, oh, I did a few things, it wasn't that bad. But when you actually look at the data and you make it visible, you get an actual better representation of what happened. So you can make your next decision. It's based on fact rather than how our brain perceives reality.
Yeah, that's great. Next slide. The next slide is something I'm sure you all know, but that some of us are still getting caught in the trap of sometimes. So email can be overwhelming, and some days you might reflect on what you did at the end of the day and think, I think maybe I just responded to like 157 emails all day. So when you reply to emails, you are fulfilling other people's to-do lists. And so you need to do that. You're part of a team. You're trying to accomplish things together. But if you have 3 things on your plate for the day, every time you get an email notification and you drop everything to respond to that email, you are prioritizing somebody else's to-do list over your own. So one of our strategies for this is to just turn notifications off for everything. So that means no sounds, no little envelopes, no banners. You want to look at Microsoft Teams Outlook and Slack. Maybe there are some other ones that you're using, but those are some pretty common ones that have notifications and banners that pop up. The reason why you do that is because it can take 20 minutes to get back on track every time you interrupt yourself. And we're going to demonstrate this for you in another couple slides here. But so you might think, okay, what is my team going to say if I don't respond to their email? Well, you can have a proactive conversation with your team about this. At FlexGC, we've been recommending that teams be having these like team charter conversations. So articulating the ways we're going to be working individually and together. So we're clear about that. But the key on this one is communicate with your team when you'll be checking email, that it will only be a certain number of times a day. And that could be a number, it could be 10. My guess is most people here are probably checking their email more than 10 times a day. And so even 10, like that's a lot, right? 10 times 20 minutes is a lot of time to get back to the thing that's on your to-do list. And you can also communicate to your team that if they need to reach you urgently, they can always do that by a text or a phone call. And if you don't do that, then frankly, you'll just be working on somebody else's priorities all day. So the idea is get yourself out of jail here. And so turn off notifications. And then when email does come in, when you're processing it during your scheduled times to check it, you want to respond if you can do it in 2 minutes or less. If you can't, then you do two things. You acknowledge it. Okay, Todd, I'll get back to you next week. And then schedule a time. So add it to your to-do list. And maybe if it's going to be a big thing you need to do, like draft a deck or something, then you want to like carve that time out by putting a time block in your schedule. Todd?
So something that helps with this is a lot of tricks we can, help us take control of our calendars, take control of our emails. So if you want to play along, this is kind of an activity you can do now or do it later, wherever you do this. But it's kind of a trick. You say and kind of repeat after me. It's I can't shake my head no, and then shake your head no. And then say, I can't pick something up, and pick something up. There's something strange and very cool that goes in your brain when you do that. It's like, I don't have to do this. I'm in control. And that's very important. Because, if you don't make a prioritized list, or if you don't control what comes in to your life and what you do, someone else will. So that's very important. And what you can really do is really create cues for yourself. Create a cue that you control and that you can manage, and you'll be a lot more productive.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. The next slide's on the Pomodoro Technique. So some of you might have heard about this, but the idea here is to use this very, very structured technique to sort of lock in productivity. So under the Pomodoro Method, what you want to do is plan your tasks and then set an amount of time. 25 minutes is usually what they recommend. So during that 25 minutes, you're going to have all your notifications off. Your phone's going to be on airplane mode, and you're going to actually set a timer for 25 minutes. The Pomodoro Method really recommends you actually use a kitchen timer rather than a phone, but I find with my phone on airplane mode, my phone's fine too. You put that time in your calendar as like a time block, so you know you're not going to get interrupted, and you let your team know that you're going to do deep work. So when you're ready, you start a timer for those 25 minutes, and then you work until the end of that 25 minutes. And the reason it's 25 minutes is because that's usually an amount of time that a brain can focus under the right circumstances. When the timer goes, then you have a choice. You can take that break, that 5-minute break, or I often find that if I'm like deeply into the task, I actually just set the timer again for 25 minutes. So you give yourself an option. And then if you do decide to take the break, then after that 5-minute break, you go back and you set the timer again. And you do that until the task is done. So for example, if I think that it's going to take me about an hour and a half to draft a deck, then I would block an hour and a half of my schedule, and I would do 3 Pomodoro cycles back to back. And then usually you'll find that this like varies person to person, but usually you'll want to find that at some point you'll need a longer break. So sometimes you'll get into the zone and you find you actually don't need a longer break for quite a long stretch, but there's a mental and physical fatigue that will happen. So you do want to pay attention to your body. You need to make a cup of tea, make a coffee maybe, you need to eat, you need to have some physical activity. So the idea of the Pomodoro Method is to make time for those things and to encourage our brains to do that deep focused work that help us to be more productive. And throughout all this, like the reason we want to be more productive is because we have 8 hours a day to work, and we have the rest of our time is supposed to be ours, right? And so you don't want to spend 12 hours a day doing your 8 hours of work. Ideally, you want to spend 8 hours a day doing 8 hours of work. And so that's where tools like Pomodoro can help you be laser focused to accomplish your 8 hours of work in just 8 hours. Todd, over to you on this one.
So this is so powerful because, humans are just so bad at estimating work. If you ever worked on any project, I think ever, the timelines go off, and we just can't estimate how much work something will do or something will take. But if you, the more you do the Pomodoro technique, you can have another measurement framework in your mind. So you can say, okay, I can do this during this time, and that helps you manage your work. The more you do it, the more strategic you can do with this technique. For example, your first Pomodoro technique, you could just work on an outline, and then get feedback, and then do another Pomodoro technique, and maybe flesh out that outline and get feedback on it. So it's a great tool to interweave with other kind of ways of working.
Yeah. And I think, Marcel, if you want to go to the next slide, I think that's yours, Todd.
Right. So, another kind of activity, if you'll all join me, this one is so much fun. If you take out your favorite word processor, I know mine, I think, is Notepad, but if you're a Corel WordPerfect fan, I know there's some Lotus Notes people in the crowd, always a fan. But if you pull up that word processor, and all I want you to do is just type out multitasking is hard. So multitasking is hard. And then the numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Right? Okay. Now try doing it at the exact same time. So yeah. So just M, you go to M, start with M, and then 1, and then U, 2, 3. I'll see, I already screwed it up. And feel free to do in the chat or wherever. Yeah. So if you notice, it's really hard. Humans are just bad at multitasking. I don't know, we strive to be multitaskers, but it's like a false reality. And when we're multitasking, it feels like we're productive because we're doing a lot at once, but we're actually not getting a lot done. If you participate and did this, it's so much easier just to type out one thing and then go to the next thing, because we're not context switching, and that's what happens when you multitask. And so it's really interesting that you can, we think about it in a weird way that, it's like, oh, I can text and watch a movie, but that's not really multitasking. You're really focusing on one thing at one time. It's more like texting and driving. Why is that illegal? Because your focus is drawn from something else. So it's like we can do you can multitask, but you can't multi-focus. So, and the more you multitask, the longer everything takes.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I love that. You can multitask, but you can't multi-focus. And the thing I would add about this in terms of like a strategy that I use around how to put multitasking to bed is to use a to-do list, right? So if I'm doing one thing and I'm, writing a briefing note or something, and immediately my brain thinks, oh shoot, I need to be doing this other thing. Sometimes that's happening because my brain is getting fatigued with the thing that I'm doing. So that's, again, Pomodoro can be great. But if you're midway through that task and you're finding you're having these ideas, like I need to do something else, just keep a piece of paper and a pencil beside you and write that down. So I'll be writing the briefing note. Oh shoot, I need to email Todd back. Email Todd goes on the list, right? And so that's a strategy that I use to keep myself focused. So when I write that down, I'm sending a signal to my brain like, yep, got that one. Stay working on the briefing note. Next slide, Marcella. Eat your frogs first. So that's a Mark Twain quote there. There's another quote that's really similar. It says, if your job is to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, you're best to eat the biggest one first. So this is from, this strategy around eating frogs is from Brian Tracy's book, Eat That Frog, 21 Great Ways to Stop Procrastinating and Get More Done in Less Time. The idea here is that in the morning, right after getting up, or when you sit down at your computer, you want to complete the most unwanted task you can think of for that day. So that's your frog. This enables you to focus on the things you don't want to do, but you actually need to do. So you take the biggest, the ugliest, the most distasteful thing you need to do, and you get that done right away. And once you do that, nothing worse can happen to you. So if you're not certain what your frog is, and this is a question I think that Jody says she often gets, so you think about the thing that you most don't want to do, but you actually need to do. And one of Jody's strategies is to actually take that, you know, there's like the way of making a to-do list that's in quadrants around the things that I need to do. So need and importance, or urgency and importance are like mapped on to like a 2x2 square. So she, instead of doing that, she says, you use 2 quadrants. So in one quadrant, you put the things you don't want to do, but actually need to do, the things you want to do and actually need to do, the things you want to do, but don't actually need to do, and the things you don't want to do and actually don't need to do. And I'll put that in the chat. I'm reading directly from Jody's notes there, so I'm just going to pop that into the chat. But this, I think, is a really powerful way to think about the thing that's most distasteful, to do that first, and then reward yourself with something you want and need to do. Todd, over to you on this one.
Mm-hmm. So there's kind of another way to think about this, is that, you know, what is the work that you love doing? Okay, you know, what are the tasks that you love do that when you do that, it doesn't feel like work, right? And then how do you take the qualities and the aspects of that kind of work, and how do you treat that as like red threads? And how do you weave those red threads into things you don't like? You know, your every answer is going to be different. But you know, if you love communications, how can you make an email mail out or something? How can you weave in that communications thing that you love into that?
Yeah, thanks. Next slide is on like a similar sort of strategy here. So how do we eat an elephant, or how do we eat a potato field? And I think we all know this, right? It's just one bite at a time. And so, you know, what's meant by this is like, there are going to be things that you need to do in your life and in your work that seem overwhelming or even impossible. But those are the things that can just be accomplished by gradually taking on just a little bit at a time. So you probably can think about things like this, you know, I know for me, like one thing that stands out is like, you know, planning a wedding, right? Maybe there's something for you at work, or for me, there was, we built our own home. So there's like these big pieces, right? But how we accomplish them is by breaking them up into teeny tiny steps. So the key here is to sit down and think about everything you have to do and start to map it out. So by mapping it out and mapping out these manageable tasks or chunks of task, it becomes less difficult to be intimidated or freeze up or feel incapable, because you can identify the first step and then the next step and the next one after that. So if you can just commit to even like 5 minutes of doing one item related to the large task, then you'll get that one done and you'll feel energized to accomplish the next. And I think something that I've noticed here around eating elephants is the more elephants you eat, the more you will want to eat an elephant. So it feels good to get our work done. It feels good to accomplish those big things and to be able to sit down at the end of the day and go, wow, today I wrote a strategy. Today I closed on the banking documents for my home, whatever it is, right? And that feels good, and it makes us want to continue to do those big pieces of work. And so I know for me this summer, I had my kids home, I was trying to work, and it felt like I couldn't accomplish any of these big things. And when I turned to this strategy and I realized actually I needed to be breaking things down into smaller tasks than I would ordinarily do to stop myself from being overwhelmed. And what I found is that strategy built on itself. So over time, I was able to do more things in a day. Over time, I was able to not be overwhelmed by something that felt large a month ago. So I think that the cool thing about this strategy that I would say is it does build on itself. So something that feels hard when you start the strategy on day 1, by day 30, you can look back and see a few big elephants you've eaten and you go, oh, I can't wait to eat the next one. Todd?
Mm-hmm. So a great way to think about this is, say you have any solution or anything you want to do, think about in your head, what is a 15% of this solution? How can I take 15% of that and do it tomorrow? What is the smallest step that I can take that I can see a result? And that will, if you can handle that, you can do anything. It's like training to do a marathon. You don't start by running the whole thing. You start by trying to do 5K or trying to go for a walk. And it makes everything a lot more attainable. Because a lot of times we think about these big goals and we say, oh, I need to wait. I need to wait till I'm ready. But it's kind of a thing we do in our head for perfectionism, or we don't want to fail. We don't want to look ashamed. But if you just try a small thing right away, it's going to snowball, and you're going to do it sooner than you think.
Yeah, awesome. So speaking of doing things sooner than you think, the next slide is a tool tip. And it's about using Trello. So Trello is a Kanban board, or like a to-do list online, or multiple to-do lists online. And the idea here is to find a way to remove visual clutter and Post-it notes, although you can see in my background, I do have Post-it notes on my wall as well. So the idea is to take some of those things and to put them in a digital repository. So Trello is, you can see it's like it's a visual way to do your to-do list. And it can really help you to not only be paperless, which enables you to like really have the mobility that's, I think, one of the benefits of being at home, right? Like take your laptop and bring it onto the back deck, or take your laptop and go to the cafe uptown if that feels safe. So you really sort of have your whole kit with you when you take your laptop. So that's a benefit. The other thing is that you can sort of keep track of everything you are working on and have worked on. So it's a way to see the elephants that you've eaten, because you can move them into a done to-do list. Trello also has some great templates that you can check out if you're looking at, like, I don't know how I would manage these to-do lists. So some people do it the typical sort of agile way. There's a whole bunch of other ways to do it. So I would encourage you to check out Trello as well. Todd, did you want to say anything on this slide, or do you want to just go to the next slide?
Yeah, let's just go to the next one.
Okay.
Okay, so what does Kanban mean? Kanban is literally translated into visual signal. So the theory is that when you use a Kanban to visualize your work. Just like our data a couple of slides up, you're looking at your work, and when you can see it, you can actually, your brain interprets it differently than if you can just, if it's in your Outlook calendar, somewhere, or if it's in GC Docs, or if it's in, who knows where. So you'll see here, we can see the needle right away. That it's like, it's something that is really, really powerful. And you can use your Kanban visual signal to do a lot of things. Especially like everything we talked about can really be managed through a Kanban way of working. Managing your cues, putting work where, work is coming, you're going to do it later, putting your Kanban so you can, see what's upcoming, so you can really decide what to do. And, what is the most common form of Kanban in the public service? That's the old sticky note on our screen monitor, right? On our computer monitor. That's a Kanban. So just think of using that, but having it as a scale that moves from to do to done.
Yeah. All right, we have another tool tip for you on the next slide, and that is FocusMate. So one way that you can improve productivity in a short burst is to schedule a co-working session. So you can do this by asking a colleague on your team. Could be a previous colleague. I tend to do this with colleagues who I like to spend time with, who are on past teams that I've worked for. So it's a neat opportunity to catch up with them in a very short way, and then hold each other accountable to working. So the idea is you just pick someone who you want to spend time with, but who you commit to not doing a lot of talking with. So you do a phone call, video call with them, take 5 minutes at the beginning to say, hey, how's it going? And then state what you're going to work on. So I would say, hey, Todd, I'm going to spend the next hour. I'm going to work on drafting this strategy document to guide Canada's procurement of some COVID stuff. And Todd would say, you know, I'm going to work on whatever it is. And then we would not go on mute necessarily, right? But you're just like staying together, staying with the thing that we want to be productive for. So we say we're going to work for 50 minutes. At the 50-minute mark, we check in, we say, hey, how'd it go? What'd you get done? And we just check in and have held each other accountable to that. So one of the tools that some people use, and this was a new tool to me, I've actually not yet used it yet, it's called FocusMate. And it's a platform that essentially matches you up with a virtual accountability partner somewhere else in the world. So Jody has used this before, and she in particular used it during the summer. She said, you know, it was very hard to stay focused when there was so much sunshine outside and interesting things happening in her neighborhood in terms of neighbors walking, people spending time outside. And yet she had like some big deliverables to do. So she did 60 FocusMate sessions and was able to, I think she was drafting some curriculum. So it's not for networking. It's not for collaborating. It's just two people holding each other accountable to the things that they're working on. Jody was saying, you know, oftentimes you're matched up with students who are doing their law degrees or their postdocs or something. Sometimes you're matched up with people in other countries. So it can be an interesting way to sort of connect with someone who has the same goal as you do, which is to stay focused. Todd, do you have anything to say on this? Have you used this strategy?
Yeah, I use this all the time. And actually, if you'll all humor me, I can kind of, I have another activity. You know, if you want to go off mute and turn your webcams on, feel free. It's a lot of fun. Take like 30 seconds. But okay, so everyone will kind of go with me. What's going to happen is I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, clap, and then clap. Okay, so if we're all going with me. So ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Right. Anyways, I didn't say clap. So if you clapped, just think about why did I clap? You clap because as humans, our brains, we seek to mimic people. So if someone else is doing something, particularly in a leadership role, we copy that. We do what their actions do, not what their words do. So if you're working with someone and they're working with you, you're kind of both keeping each other in check. Your actions are speaking louder than your words, even if you could be on mute or anything. So something to think about.
Yeah. All right. The next slide is just an image around some of the great resources. These are books on productivity or focused working. But this is to say you can take a look at these, but really, and you can go to the next slide now too, Marcella, there's one size fits all approach. So we've given you a sampling of some of the things that work for us. And you're going to find that some of these work really well for you. Some of them you're probably already doing. Maybe you have some entirely different strategies. We'd love to hear from you as well. And don't feel obligated to use a tool that's not working for you or an approach that's not working for you. You might also find during the pandemic that things that worked for you before are not working for you now. So I know that's something that I've experienced. The old tools and techniques that I used to stay focused just weren't working for me over the summer, and I've had to do some big adjustments. So I would encourage you, try new things and figure out what else is working for you. And that, Marcella, is the end of our slides. If you want to stop sharing, we're happy to take questions and just have a conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Erica, and thanks, Todd, very much for sharing all of that. I think very useful information, and thank you for subbing in for Jody for sure, who is a coach on many of these topics and the use of many of these tools. So I would like to remind our participants that you can ask any questions that you have using the Q&A function in Zoom, or by putting your questions in the chat. I see we have one hand raised, so if you'd like to ask any question, please feel free to do so in the chat or the Q&A function as mentioned. And I see we do have one in the Q&A. Says, what was the 30% fact on the brain that was given from the beginning of the presentation?
Yeah, that was me. So this is something, and I can find a citation for you, but I don't have that offhand. And this is that about 30% of our mental activity right now is occupied by sort of pandemic programming, let's call it. So this is the like, okay, what do I need to remember when I go to pick up my kids at school? Oh, right, mask, and I need to bring my own hand sanitizer. This is the, okay, Amazon just dropped a package at my front door. Do I clean it? Do I leave it for 72 hours? Can I bring it indoors to do that? What do I do with the packaging? It's like this extra stuff that we didn't have to think about that our brains are actually constantly having to make decisions about. My own sort of life hack on this for me, this is maybe silly, some people will laugh, I'm sure, but I actually have gone to a capsule wardrobe during the pandemic. I put away all the clothes that don't match each other, and I've moved almost entirely to shades of gray and black, with the exception of my yoga pants, because I don't want more decisions in my life. And most people don't see what I'm wearing half my body anyway. So like, think about the things that you can do to increase your decision capacity for the things that count. So other strategies on this would be like, choose what you're going to have for breakfast every morning and just have it every morning. Choose what your kids are going to eat for lunch every single day and send that every day, you know? So what are the ways, the places where you are making a decision every day or every hour? You don't have to.
Okay, that's an amazing way to look at things for sure.
If I can add, you really want to think about, what are thoughts and what is thinking. Our thoughts is that surface level, things that don't matter. Our thinking is things we have to, creatively delve into. And, these answers aren't known to us. We have to think about it to discover stuff. And we want to take our thoughts and put them elsewhere and concentrate on thinking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'd like to remind people that you feel free to ask questions in the language of your choice, so either in English or in French. If there are any responses that we need to translate, we can do that either from English to French or vice versa. There is another question in the Q&A. What were the quadrant headings for what you want to do and need to do combos? So I will say that the presentation will be posted on the GC Wiki site. And we're working to get the videos online as well. But if this is a quick to answer question, feel free to answer that, Todd and Erica.
Yeah, I posted that in the chat already. So I'm just going to post it again because it might have gotten lost. So I'll just do that.
Okay, that sounds great. Awesome. So in the work from home context, so how has our idea of productive kind of changed? And has it changed? And Erica, you're kind of an expert, I think, on working from home. I think our first experience meeting was, years ago when you had become one of the first kind of regional free agents. And I think, the systems that you have in place, you've probably had in place for a number of years. But in terms of, I guess, our current context, how can we, feel like at the end of the day, we've still had, a productive day?
Yeah. So I would say, and Todd, I mean, you were from home a bunch too. So, and since before the pandemic, so I think Todd would also have some great thoughts here. For me, I would say in different phases of my life, I've found different productivity strategies work, or in different roles that I've had, I found I'm more susceptible to certain anti-productivity things. So for example, I've had roles, I'm in one of them now, where it's super easy to stay in email jail because there's lots of new information coming in. And I'll be honest, like how email works in our brain is like, hey, new email, woo, that's awesome. I'm going to click that. There's like all this endorphin stuff that happens by clicking the email, reading the thing, da, da, da. And so I know for me, one of the things that I have to work on now is staying out of email jail. I'll also say, like, one of the other things, being a free agent, I move around a lot. So if any of you have ever gotten a new computer, you know that the things that you had done on your old computer, removing notifications, making your Outlook work in the way you want to do, like, that takes time. And so I'm aware, again, I've just gotten my new devices. I need to sort of do some of those things to make my setup work for me. And if you're looking for tips on that, I would say, like, tweet at Jody or email Jody, Jody Leblanc at Canada.ca, because again, she is a productivity coach and she has some great, like, how to set up your device to work for you tips. And then in terms of, like, broadly speaking, how my strategies have changed over the course of the pandemic, I would say I initially just had to get really comfortable with the fact that, like, I was anxious, and and that was causing lots of things, and some of them connected to productivity. So I had to get moving again. Like, I stopped going, being physically active. And so I had to get moving again. That, counteracts anxiety and did help me become more productive. But I also, I think, had to write down a lot more things. This, like, pandemic programming and fatigue meant that I couldn't hold things in my head. I couldn't see patterns in information as naturally as I could. So those are some things that I've been sort of working on. And I'll say, like, it continues to be a journey for me. So Todd, I'm interested to hear what you have been working on too.
So I think the most important thing, going back to our slides, is that, the best tool we have is our brains. So you really got to do what's best for your brain. And, I think most of it's, like, forgiving yourself. If you're not feeling it, don't waste your time. Go for a walk. It's probably going to come up when you're on that walk or doing whatever. It's going to unstick itself. So don't, I know as public servants, we like to beat ourselves up a little bit. We got to put in that 7.5 hours a day. We got to, make the taxpayers' dollars really worth it. But, being productive and being sustainable is much better for the taxpayer than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we've seen over the last 6 months is a tendency towards feeling that you have to be kind of hyper scheduled in your day, depending on your role. And I think the reality of things is that we wouldn't do that in an office context. We wouldn't have meetings that, one was right after the other, multiple floors apart with different people and different stakeholders. And we wouldn't, we would allow ourselves some time to think through and prepare for the next meeting. And I think, lots of us kind of need to do that with our current days, and being able to block out some, 15 minutes to go refill my coffee, prep for, the next meeting that's on a completely different subject with a different set of stakeholders, and kind of move on from there. We have a question from the Q&A. So this is from a student, and they're wondering if you have any tips on how to divide work from school. So the comment is, focus on school when it's a school day and focus on work when it's a work day. I find myself stressing out about everything school related when I'm working and work related when I'm doing school. So do you have any ideas on that? Alors, je pense que le personne a nommé comme les défis d'être un étudiant et puis d'être un employé. Et on a vu avec certains employés et étudiants qu'ils veulent avoir des heures pour chacun des activités, mais c'est peut-être trop d'heures pour ces activités. So I think we've seen with and heard from some students that with the doing school remotely, they've kind of upped their hours of work compared to what they would do normally. So if they were working part-time in a Government of Canada context, and doing so in person, they might have done 15 hours, but now they're kind of like, well, I have extra time, so I can schedule, 30 hours of work, or I can work, almost full-time while doing full-time school. So do you have any tips on sort of how they can kind of manage that break between school and work?
Do you want to take that, Todd?
I can go. There's something really valuable in doing something, taking some time and thinking about it. So, say you've just finished your schoolwork, take an hour, take half an hour, think about what you did, what still needs to be done, make a list for it, and then leave it. And then start something else. Do the same thing. The next day when you go back to school, pick up that list. what's changed, what still needs to be done, and go from there. And after a while, you'll start to notice patterns. And then it's only really in reflection where you can say, oh, I've noticed that I'm in the same room for all of my work. Maybe an experiment to try is make a school zone, make a work zone, something like that. But it's, every context is different. There's no one size fits all model. You just have to think about how you work, what you want, and try new things.
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, to pick up on some things that are happening in the chat here, I think this same tension between like, I have these different roles and is happening in other places too. So Karina, I think, is saying that she feels that tension between like, I'm a parent and I'm an employee, but there's this blurring that's happening. I'm a parent and I'm a worker, and I find that too. I'll also say I'm a parent and a worker, and I sit on some volunteer boards. I'm also a neighbor. I'm also the primary grocery shopper. And these things are kind of all blurring together, right? Because I'm trying to do my groceries during an off-peak time, which means I'm trying to do them on my lunch hour, which means, there's like a constant juggling. And I think lots of people are doing that. This like working asynchronously is happening. And we have these 24 gold coins. How we're going to spend them, our collective agreements say, we're supposed to be working our core hours during A to B, but a lot of managers are being more flexible and saying, as long as the work gets done and you're putting in your 7.5 hours, that's fine. So I would say the key there, and this is again picking up on some of the chat things as well, is like, how do I not work more than my 7.5 or 8 hours? And I think that's about like holding yourself accountable and having clear communications with your team. There was a great Leaders GC chat on this last week, and that came up as well, like I'm working more. And I think, remember, you don't have the signals you used to have around starting around 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon, the noises of people putting on coats and closing laptops and saying goodbye. So you have to find like, what will be your signals? So for me, I have an alarm goes off. I have to pick my kids up. So I have an alarm that goes off. I have also set in my Outlook calendar, close out the day 15 minutes. So 15 minutes before my alarm goes off to say, close your laptop, I have this like close out the day. And what I try to do during the close out the day is reflect on what I've accomplished. So what are the elephants, so that I can sort of feel like, yeah, I did a thing today. And then I write a to-do list. I usually have 2 to-do lists going, and this might help students as that like student, you're balancing the multiple roles. And that is, I have one long to-do list, and then I have a top 3 that goes on a Post-it note that I'm working on. And the top 3 is like the things that I want to accomplish today. And if I accomplish those 3, boom, I have done that list. I throw it in the recycling, and I get to write 3 new things. And then it becomes easy at the end of the day to feel like I've accomplished. The days that I accomplish like 9 or 12 things, like, I'm winning. and I think creating that sense of I'm winning is something that I want to do every day. And when you're winning your day, it's much easier to like close your laptop, turn it off, and go to do the things that you want to do in your personal life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, sorry, go ahead, Todd.
Humans are really habit driven. So if you can make a new habit, it will really help you in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like from the manager perspective, what do you see as the biggest things that managers can do to help employees understand their own productivity, but also kind of setting those kind of limits? I think I'll just sort of say first off that managers who are treating employees as though they're available 24/7, that is something that would absolutely need to change. Just because we're at home or working from home doesn't mean that if you contact somebody at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, that's an appropriate thing to do. So I think it's both up to managers and employees to kind of set those kind of boundaries. And the chat last week was very emblematic of that. But what can managers do in your opinions to support employees and also let them know that their production and productivity is within sort of what they're expecting from their team?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go, Todd?
Oh, sure. I would say managers, be curious. Want to know what's going on. And then, as a manager, you have to manage your hats, but, let them know, what is up for evaluation, what is feedback, what is coaching. And yeah, but overall, be curious.
Yeah, and I would just add, like, set an example, and like, so what that means is, like, if you don't want your staff to be sending emails at 10 o'clock at night, don't send emails at 10 o'clock at night. That doesn't mean if you're trying to catch up and you're a manager and you want whatever, like, but don't connect to the VPN and send the emails. Do that in the morning. The other thing that I've noticed, like, I'm a regional employee, but I think a lot more employees are becoming regional employees as we've seen people move to a place that makes sense for them in a pandemic, whether that's caring for elders or caring for kids, giving kids more space, having help, or being in a place that they really love. And that's meant, I think we are seeing public servants move away from centers. So myself, I moved away from Vancouver, and others I know are moving away from Ottawa. And as we're seeing that happen, we're seeing, like, the time zones are having a much more interesting role to play on their work. So actually, as a result of the Leaders GC chat last week, I added something to my signature, which says something along the lines of, please note, I'm working in British Columbia and my working hours are probably not aligned with your working hours. Please respond during your working hours, right? Like, obviously you're going to get an email from me at 6 p.m. That's my day, right? And that doesn't mean that I want a response from you before 6:30 p.m. It means you should respond tomorrow, and we'll get to it tomorrow. So reducing that sense of urgency. And then the other thing that I would say, Josh, you mentioned at the beginning, that managers, should, like, respect personal time. Just because we're at home, there shouldn't be all these extra emails, right? And that's true. And I would add that managers shouldn't assume that the time people used to spend commuting is now time spent for working, right? Like, the time you spent commuting was your personal time before. It just so happens to be your personal time available to you for whatever else you want right now. So some people find that a great productivity strategy to get their brain working in the morning is to do a commute. So that means leaving your house, going a little walk around the neighborhood, getting maybe your heart rate up, getting a little energy going, reflecting on your day to come, and then, sitting down at your desk as if you have arrived at work for the day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just to provide a bit of a summary in French, alors je pense que vous avez mentionné que c'est à les gestionnaires de comme gérer leur équipe par leur exemple. Alors si tu envoies les courriels à toute heure du jour, c'est peut-être votre équipe qui pense qu'il doit avoir une réponse à cette courriel à cet temps. Alors, c'est de gérer votre temps et de donner un exemple positif de le balance entre le temps pour travailler, le temps pour les choses personnelles. Alors, je pense que c'est vraiment important pour les gestionnaires d'être cet exemple. So very important for managers to be leading by example. And I think we could do a whole other session on how managers should manage employees and say, if you're sending an email at 10 p.m., don't send that email at 10 p.m. Set a, delayed send at 7, 8 in the morning. Yeah, definitely, I think there's a strong role for managers to play in being a good example and not, sort of making additional issues with their team. So we've gone through quite a number of sort of techniques that can be used in terms of staying productive and a lot of different platforms. But are there any sort of, as we're getting towards the end of the session, any sort of like final thoughts or like things that you wish you had started 6 months ago or 7 months ago that you would want to share?
Yeah, I wish I gave myself permission to change my strategies. So for a long time, I'd been using Outlook tasks, and that had been working really well for me. At the beginning of the pandemic, I had just changed jobs, and then there was a pandemic, and it wasn't really working for me. And I kind of just like kept using it because it had been working for me for years. And so finally, I think it was the summer, and I was like, this is not working. All I have is an all red to-do list. I feel overwhelmed, and I just archived them all. What's on my plate today? Start again. So give yourself permission to, if you have a strategy that's not working for you anymore, just ditch it and try something new.
Yeah, great plan. Todd, any thoughts?
Mine is, if you'll all humor me one more time, just one more exercise that I love doing. But if you take your arms and kind of follow me, and cross your arms like this. Okay, now go. Boom. Now, okay, now take your arms and now cross them in reverse. Right. That feels pretty weird, right? Right. That's because we have a default. We default cross our arms the same way we've done, every day, all day, for our whole lives. But when you try a new thing, crossing your arms the opposite way, it feels weird at first. But what is something that would make crossing your arms differently easier? Maybe trying to do it here and there. When you can, cross it, and over time, it becomes easier. It becomes a new default. And that's what working in a new way, trying new things, that's the learning process. So let it, forgive yourself for not being perfect as soon as you try, and just keep at it.
As you're talking, Todd, I can't help thinking about like the meta, like we're working from home in a new way, right? And so it's not just about crossing your arms. It's not just about trying a new tool, trying to be productive in new ways. It's about like look at your surroundings. They're really different than they used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, part of what's happened over the last 6 months is, Erica and Todd and people involved in the FlexGC network and others kind of helping to support public servants who are not used to this sort of reality, who are not used to, being away from their colleagues outside of their office. Alors, je pense que votre réseau de FlexGC a eu un rôle important de engager les fonctionnaires partout au Canada pour donner les outils comme cette web diffusion aujourd'hui pour les fonctionnaires qui ne sont pas à l'aise avec cette situation. So I think the FlexGC network has played a huge role in terms of supporting public servants, and certainly we've appreciated your contributions on our last few weeks of sessions, our next few weeks of sessions, and certainly any of our virtual learning series offerings over the last 6 months. So I think we should probably wrap there because we're down to about 2 minutes left. So from a next step standpoint, so we have a couple more sessions with FlexGC coming up. So next Tuesday, I believe, is on parenting, and then we have another session on I guess it's the 20th, and then a webcast with Canada School of Public Service coming up on October 23rd as well. So there are a lot of good sessions coming up through FYN and through FlexGC to support you during this time. So definitely take advantage of those. I will say we're working on getting the videos from the last 3 sessions edited, and then today's video as well. And we'll get those up on our website and email that out to everyone who registered for the sessions as well. So je pense que ça a été très utile aujourd'hui de partager ces conseils, ces ressources. Et puis merci à Erica et à Todd
for breaking out.
Oh, and can I just a shameless plug?
But Todd has something to say.
Shameless plug at the end. If you're interested in Agile, there's an Agile community practice. It's kind of like join the rebellion. We have a lean coffee next week, Wednesday at 1 p.m. Just 1 hour. A lot of people will be there. If you have any questions or if you like Agile, want to learn more about Agile, join the meetup group. Join our Slack. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And Marcella has the link in the chat, which is great. Awesome. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a great day, and hopefully this helped you to stay more productive and be a bit easier on yourselves going forward. So thanks, Todd. Thanks, Erica. Merci à tous.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.